They didn't even bother speaking when they arrived. The Taykar Dominion had ravaged 15 other systems with little more than a flick of a claw. Worlds crumbled, cities blackened, and entire populations either enslaved or vaporized in seconds. They were considered untouchable, the apex predators of the Orion Rim. When they came to Saul, they expected another quick conquest. They expected fear, but what they got was silence. Not the kind of silence born from submission. No, this was something colder, deeper. The kind of silence a hunter gives his prey right before the kill, when all the noise has been sucked out of the air and the only thing left is breath and calculation. Commander Rain Varrock of the Dominion fleet stared at the projection hovering above the bridge. It was grainy, distorted, a primitive transmission, or so they thought. But one image was clear enough to cut the air, a black warship motionless near Jupiter, facing them alone. "One?" he growled, his fangs clicking as he turned to his second-in-command. "Just one vessel, Commander. No fleet, no hails, no energy buildup. It's simply waiting." That unsettled the crew more than they'd admit. The Taykar had obliterated dozens of warships at once. Entire defense networks collapsed in minutes. But there was something wrong about this. It was the design. Angular, solid, no artistic curves, no ceremonial ornaments. Just raw, industrial menace, a floating slab of armor and intent. No species they'd fought had ever built something like this. It didn't even look like a warship. It looked like a threat made real. And still it didn't move. Varrock snarled. "Then destroy it! Fire main battery!" They obeyed. Twin energy lances screamed toward the black silhouette in the void, the kind of blast that could split a moon in half. It hit dead on. A blinding flare erupted, and some officers even turned away, assuming it was over. But when the light faded, the warship was still there. Untouched, not a scratch. "Impossible," one of the Taykar whispered. "No shielding, no signature." Another stammered. "It didn't block the blast. It ignored it." Then the human ship moved. A subtle shift, a turn, like a giant rotating its head to look straight at them. And for the first time, Varrock felt something he'd never felt in space. Dread. The ship's front opened, not in any elegant unfolding, but like a jaw cracking open. No preamble, no verbal challenge. Just a sudden eruption of light and sound. A single railgun slug, a physical projectile, fired from the human vessel at near luminal velocity. It tore through the lead Taykar cruiser like it was made of paper. No explosion, no fireball, just holes, carved clean through 3 ships behind it before vanishing into space. Every Taykar officer stood frozen. Then came the second shot. Then the third. In 90 seconds, the human warship destroyed 9 of their vessels. Without activating shields, without taking fire, without so much as a transmission. And that was when the real horror started. The human vessel began broadcasting a signal. Not in Taykar language, not even a universal one. It was in English, ancient, harsh, unfiltered, but they felt the meaning in their bones. "You're trespassing. This system is under human protection. You may leave. Once." The words didn't echo. They stabbed. Varrock hesitated. He'd led conquests against gas giants, silenced rebellions across the Milky Way's spine, but never, never had a single enemy vessel turned an entire battle into a warning. And that's what this was, a warning, one they were never meant to forget. He considered ordering a retreat. For the first time in his career, surrender entered his mind like a whisper. But then another message came through. Not spoken, visual. It was a feed of Earth, live. And then another image. Every Taykar vessel in orbit being tracked. They were being painted by hundreds of smaller railguns, satellites, drones, and subsystems they'd never even seen. The entire Sol system had gone dark on their scanners. But it hadn't gone quiet. The humans had jammed them, hunted them, and now they were speaking in silence again. This wasn't a battle. It was a trap, and they'd already lost. They didn't retreat. Not because they were brave, not because they believed they could win. They stayed because they didn't know how to run. Pride had a grip on the Te-Kar's throat, choking logic, muffling fear. Varrock stood paralyzed in front of his command chair, his mind racing through strategies, none of which accounted for this. No shield penetration, no energy readings, no visible fleet, just one warship that tore through them like tissue and then vanished into the black. And yet it was still there, watching, waiting. Behind him the crew was panicking in silent glances, restrained panic, trying to hide it but failing. Te-Kar didn't fear war. They lived for it. But this wasn't war. This wasn't even slaughter. This was psychological warfare, done with a precision they had never known humans to possess. "Open a channel," Varrock growled, his voice shaky. His comms officer hesitated. "To the human vessel?" "Yes," he snapped. "Now." The static crackled, no image, no sound. Varrock cleared his throat. "This is Commander Rain Varrock of the Te-Kar Dominion. You've made your show. You've demonstrated your strength. Let us—" The voice that responded cut him off mid-sentence. Deep, cold, male, flat, no emotion, no effort to sound diplomatic. "This isn't a demonstration." Then came silence. And that silence carried more threat than any weapons system. "What the hell are they?" the navigator whispered. "They were primitives. The reports said—" Varrock turned on him. The reports were wrong. Wrong about everything. Humans weren't supposed to be this advanced. The Te-Kar had intelligence gathered from centuries of passive scans and intercepted transmissions. Internal conflict, division, low-scale weaponry. A planet too polluted to sustain long-range colonization. A species on the edge of self-destruction. And yet, a warship stood before them, radiating a confidence so pure it felt alien. Varrock's second-in-command leaned closer. "We have reinforcements 2 jumps out, 30 vessels. We could—" "No!" Varrock snapped. "We couldn't!" They watched the replay of the railgun's first strike on loop, and every time it hit like prophecy. One solid slug from a human weapon had annihilated 4 cruisers. 4. Without heat, without visible energy output, just raw force. What kind of species builds a weapon that doesn't even explode, just obliterates? Humans, apparently. He'd underestimated the oldest, most savage truth in the galaxy. Fear doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits in silence, waiting for your next mistake. And the Te-Kar had already made theirs. Across the bridge, an alarm buzzed. "New signal, Commander," the tech officer muttered, eyes locked to his panel. "It's not a weapon signature, it's a file." "A file? A transmission, not in language. It's visual." The image appeared on the bridge's central screen. Footage. Historical archive footage. From Earth. At first it looked primitive. Grainy black and white film of trenches, tanks, and men running through fire. Then came the mushroom clouds, bombers streaking over cities, entire forests napalmed into ash, carriers on oceans, missiles underwater, men and women, shouting, bleeding, dying, yet never stopping. Every era, every war, every piece of human brutality across time, neatly arranged like a message. "We've always been at war. You're just late to the party." Then the final clip. A voiceover. Male, calm, recorded decades ago. A warning written for themselves. and now sent to their enemies. We do not fight because we love war, we fight because we have to. And when we do not stop. The feed ended, and the human warship moved again. Its weapons didn't power up, its engines didn't flare, it drifted forward, slowly, confidently, directly into the center of the Dominion's formation. That wasn't a tactic. That was bait! Varroc's instincts screamed, "Reverse thrust! Clear formation! Now!" But it was too late. The instant their ships began to move, the trap was sprung. From the gas clouds of Jupiter's upper atmosphere, dozens of smaller human vessels erupted like hidden wolves. No bright flashes, no announcements. They simply started ripping into the Taykar fleet. Silent, efficient, brutal. Each ship was small, maybe a tenth the size of a Dominion destroyer, but each carried kinetic weaponry that shattered hulls on impact. Some Taykar tried to engage, but their targeting systems were jammed. Their communications scrambled. They were fighting blind. Varroc watched his fleet dissolve into chaos. The black warship in the center remained untouched, a fortress in space, casually drifting, never even firing again. It didn't need to. Its message had already been delivered. And its prey had already begun to die. It wasn't a battle anymore, it was an execution. One by one, Taykar ships exploded or fell silent, floating wreckage tumbling through space like gutted carcasses. There was no sound, space was cruel like that, but silence somehow made it worse. No heroic last words, no calls for retreat, just flickers of destruction and panic, blinking out across the radar like stars dying. Varroc stood in the middle of the bridge, clutching the edge of the command console, his claws digging into the alloy. He was sweating. Something Taykar physiology rarely did. His heart raced in a rhythm more akin to prey than predator. "Still no communication from the flanks?" he asked, already knowing the answer. The comms officer shook his head. "Nothing. Either jammed or gone." Gone. 31 ships at the beginning. 9 in the first 2 minutes, 15 more by now, and the rest? Scattered, isolated, overwhelmed. The human ships were everywhere and nowhere at once. Stealth modules, impossible maneuverability, weapons that ignored shields. The Taykar were supposed to be masters of orbital tactics. But the humans weren't fighting by any known doctrine. They fought savagely, intelligently. Every strike targeted blind spots, structural weak points, weak hull sectors, life support systems. They weren't destroying ships, they were dissecting them. "Commander, look!" A sharp gasp from the front deck pulled Varroc's attention. The human warship, the main one, was projecting something again. Not a transmission. A hologram, enormous, hanging in space like a god's warning. It was a human. One man. Standing tall in a pitch-black uniform. No armor, no weapons. Just a man. Staring back at them. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't moving. He just stood there, calm, quiet, still, while death bloomed around him. No name, no introduction. Just his eyes, cold and utterly unimpressed, tracking their command ship as if he were judging them. Varroc couldn't explain why it hit so hard. They'd seen human footage, some of it even exaggerated. But this was different. This wasn't a leader giving orders. This was a witness, a judge, a man watching the storm unfold like it was already decided. "He's not even reacting," the navigation officer muttered. "He's just watching us die." Varroc turned to his remaining bridge crew. "How did we not see this coming?" The room stayed silent, and deep down they all knew the answer. Because they never cared. Humanity was just another mark on the map, another backwater species in a quiet spiral arm. The Dominion hadn't even declared war formally. They just showed up, expecting to conquer a species, too divided, too broken, too obsessed with their own internal bickering to unite. But in that mistake, the Dominion uncovered the only truth that mattered. You don't have to like each other to kill for each other. Humans might have been fractured, but when an outsider came for their home, their species, they turned. They became monsters, and no one had prepared for that. A sudden explosion rocked the ship. Everyone lurched forward, alarms blaring. Red emergency lights bathed the command center in a warning glow. Port side hull breach, decks 3 through 7, gone. Autocannons offline, we've lost visual on flanking ships. We're blind, Commander. We've got no feed on the enemy. The panic was deafening. Varrock turned to his second. Evacuate? Escape pods? The response was bleak. They'll track and destroy them before we clear orbit. Of course they would. The humans didn't want surrender. They didn't want prisoners. They wanted witnesses, and the witnesses wouldn't live either. Varrock stumbled back into his chair, a broken shell of the predator he'd once been. On the screen, the human figure still stood, still silent, still watching. And for the first time in his life, Varrock did something no Taykar war leader had ever done. He opened a direct frequency to Earth. No encryption, no code, just open air. This is Commander Varrock of the Taykar Dominion. He began, his voice cracking. We acknowledge defeat. We underestimated you. We misjudged humanity. The signal cut off. A low hum filled the room. Something was powering up. The crew looked around in horror. The human warship, the silent executioner, was finally charging its primary weapon. Not the railgun. Something bigger. Something final. Do we fire? His second asked. Try. One last volley? Varrock shook his head slowly, his voice hollow. Number it won't matter. They were never fighting us. They were teaching us. Then the weapon fired. No explosion, just light, blinding, white, and pure. And when it faded, their flagship was gone. No debris, no smoke, just absence. They called it Project Godhammer. It didn't start with generals or politicians. It started with a funeral. Lieutenant Commander Aaron Beck stood alone on the rain-soaked platform of Outpost Cronus 7, deep in Earth orbit, as the last of the coffins slid into the launch tube. 126 officers, most barely old enough to shave, slaughtered in the first wave when the Taykar exploratory vessels entered human space and annihilated forward base Sigma without warning. No declaration, no negotiation, just extermination. His hands trembled as he tapped the launch protocol. The bodies would be burned up in Earth's atmosphere, the final military salute. But there were too many of them. Too many kids. Too many faces that still haunted his dreams. And no one in the government would call it what it was. They used words like incursion, incident, and first contact conflict. But Beck, he called it what it was. Murder. And from that moment forward, he promised something deep inside himself, not to lead a war, not to fight for peace, but to make sure they never did this to humanity again. He turned away from the tube and made his way down the silent corridor, each step ringing with the kind of certainty only loss can carve into a man. He wasn't old, late 30s, sharp, clear-eyed, but loss had aged him. Something about watching your students and soldiers vaporized while bureaucrats debated treaties made the soul calcify. Beck was done waiting. And so, in the shadow of tragedy, Godhammer was born. It wasn't sanctioned. Not at first. But some men in quiet corners of Earth's military complex had been waiting for this kind of moment. Quiet engineers, angry scientists, retired colonels who never quite stopped planning for war. They didn't just build a weapon, they built a warning. Warship Axiom 09, a Dreadnought-class prototype, forged in secret on Titan's dark side. No press, no ceremony, just precision. The hull was crafted from neutronium-reinforced alloys that didn't reflect most sensor arrays. It didn't need shields. It didn't have weak points. Every square meter of it was a weapon, covered in railguns, EMP mines, drone bays, fusion warheads, and classified tech even Beck didn't have clearance to fully understand. But the heart of the ship? That was his. A weapon that didn't just destroy, it erased. Project Razorlight, a gravity-focused singularity destabilizer. It didn't detonate. It folded a tiny sliver of space in on itself and collapsed everything inside, like God snuffing a candle between two fingers. And it could only fire once per cycle. One shot, one erasure. Beck stared at the terminal screen now, far from the battlefield. Axiom 09's feed streamed directly to him in his bunker on Earth. He didn't need to be on board to know what was happening. He'd trained every man and woman on that crew personally. And when he watched the Tekar flagship disappear in one flicker of light, not explode, not break apart, but simply cease, he didn't feel triumph. He felt silence, deep and heavy, a silence not born of peace, but justice. A voice crackled through the speaker. Commander Roland Kess, captain of the Axiom 09. Target eliminated. No survivors. Remaining Tekar ships fleeing Sol orbit. Beck closed his eyes. Stand down, Razorlight. Begin sweep and clean operations. No signals leave the system without clearance. Understood. He leaned back in his chair, listening to the static. His hand hovered over the command console, where encrypted folders sat untouched. He opened one. Inside, dozens of intercepted Tekar transmissions, surveillance on other galactic powers, their reactions, their fear. Humans had been the subject of jokes, of bets, of dismissive laughter. Now every one of those alien eyes was watching Sol like it was a black hole with teeth. The message had landed. They would think twice. He opened a direct line to the Earth Defense Network. Faces popped up. Officers, advisors, silent men in suits with soulless eyes. I want a system-wide lockdown. Any alien vessel crossing Jupiter's shadow gets one chance to turn around. One. After that, I want their atoms scattered. One of them cleared his throat. The UN is drafting. I don't give a damn what the UN is drafting, Beck said. This isn't diplomacy anymore. This is containment. We gave peace a chance. Now we give them something else. What exactly? Another asked. Beck looked up, and he said it slowly, deliberately. Fear. The Tekar homeworld was burning, not from war, but from shame. Word of the defeat spread faster than any official transmission. The great Dominion fleet, once worshipped as an unstoppable force across 1,000 systems, had not only been beaten, it had been humiliated. 500 million citizens watched the moment their flagship vanished into nothing. No wreckage, no escape pods, just erased, gone, like it had never existed. And the ones who survived? They came back in pieces, limping warships, shattered hulls, flickering life support systems, and warriors who couldn't meet each other's eyes. Commander Varrock was one of them. Dragged from the remains of his cruiser by recovery teams, he was thrown into an isolation chamber the moment he stepped off the landing bay. Not for decontamination, no, for containment. He was the man who lost to the humans. In the capital city of Carthun, a storm of protests had already erupted. Youth mobs painted human symbols across government buildings in blood-red dye. Mock coffins lined the palace gates. Dominion loyalists who had once laughed at Earth's name were now demanding answers. How could this happen? Why did we attack them? Who gave the order? And most damning of all, what else have they been hiding from us? Inside the High War Council chamber, Supreme Strategist Ovek slammed his claw against the stone table. Primitive apes don't build Singularity-class weapons, not in 2 centuries. That warship was a lie. They've had that tech for decades. They were waiting for us." No one answered. He wasn't wrong. Every assumption the Dominion made had been shredded in one brutal strike. The humans weren't behind. They were quiet. They weren't disorganized. They were watching. And when provoked, they didn't posture. They executed. An advisor cleared her throat. "The Galactic Senate is calling for an inquiry. They want a public apology to Earth, immediate reparations, a withdrawal from all contested sectors." Ovek turned on her. "Apologize? After losing a fleet? You want us to kneel to them?" Another voice chimed in from the far end. Deeper, colder. High Inquisitor Dern. "I want to know if Earth is the only planet that's been hiding weapons like this." Everyone turned. Dern stood tall, regal in his dark, crimson armor, unshaken by the chaos. "We didn't just lose a battle. We exposed ourselves. We assumed we were the top predator in a galaxy of prey. But humans, they don't think like prey. They don't care if we're older, stronger, more numerous. They just wanted to be left alone." "And we poked the wrong beast," someone muttered. Dern nodded. "Now they know what we are. And worse, we know what they are." Ovek's voice cracked. "Then what do you suggest? Surrender. Let Earth claim dominance?" "No," Dern said calmly. "We do what they did." He leaned forward, letting the weight of his words settle. "We evolve." Back in his isolation chamber, Varrock stared through the reinforced glass, listening to the riot outside the palace compound. He could hear the screams, the anger, the disbelief, but none of it mattered. Because Varrock had seen it. Not the weapons, not the tactics. He had seen the look on that human commander's face. The stillness. The silence. The cold certainty of a species that had been broken 1,000 times, and came back stronger every single time. And now that same look was starting to spread across Teikar. He could feel it. They weren't questioning their loss anymore. They were questioning their leaders, their entire doctrine, their purpose. He'd served the Dominion for 39 years. But as he sat there, broken, bruised, and forgotten, he felt something he'd never felt before. Not hatred, not fear, respect, and a strange, bitter thought crept into his mind, one that scared him more than death. Maybe we deserved to lose. Earth was quiet, not peaceful. No, not that. But a kind of stillness had settled, the kind that came after a long scream, after the blood had dried, after revenge had been served with such cold precision that even the victors weren't sure how to feel about it. In the war room under Geneva's fortified command complex, a dozen leaders sat around the black table, each of them representing a fractured but now united Earth. Flags hung still against the sealed walls. Monitors glowed dimly. No one spoke, because they'd all seen the footage. The Axiom 09, the kill shot, the Dominion fleet folding in on itself. The way those alien ships tried to run but were picked off one by one like targets at a firing range. They'd watched in real time as humanity took its place in the galactic food chain, not at the bottom, not even in the middle, at the top. But now came the hangover. President Elena Marek of the Pan-American Coalition rubbed her temples, her voice low. "We've received 72 diplomatic packets in the last 4 hours. Every major alien government wants to talk, some offering peace, others asking for permission to exist near our borders." "Good," said General Klaus Brenner, leaning forward. His voice carried steel. "Let them be afraid." Elena turned toward him. "We didn't build Axiom 09 to be feared. We built it to survive." "No," Brenner corrected. "We built it because they killed our people. We built it to make sure the next bastard who thinks we're prey remembers what happens when a cornered animal bites back." The room fell quiet again. No one could deny it. The moment Earth struck back, Something in the galaxy had changed. The old powers, the smug empires, the ancient races had suddenly remembered that time moves forward, and humanity had caught up faster than anyone expected. But the cost? That was still being counted. Director Singh from the Eurasian bloc scrolled through casualty numbers. 2,000 confirmed dead, 3,000 injured, 2 space stations lost in the first wave, and that's just civilian infrastructure. Economically, we've been set back a decade. Politically, we may never go back to normal. Brenner waved a hand. There's no going back. Normal was the reason we got hit in the first place. Elena raised an eyebrow. You want to keep building Axiom-class ships? Create an entire fleet of them? He didn't answer with words, just a look. And that was all she needed. The silence returned. Not disagreement, but caution. Everyone here knew what was coming next. Power like this wasn't just a shield. It was a sword. And once you drew it, you either kept swinging, or someone took it from you. A notification pinged on the table console. Classified. Beck's clearance only. He opened it. Live feed. It was Varrock, the surviving Dominion commander, giving a recorded statement from his home world. No resistance, no defiance. Just weary eyes and a voice that carried something foreign in it. Submission. We were wrong, Varrock said. You are not weak. You are not fractured. You are not the children we thought you were. You are human. And that word now means something. Beck closed the screen. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just stared at the table for a long moment. Then finally, quietly, he said, Power like this. It doesn't go away. Everyone in the room turned to him. Axiom 09 wasn't our final weapon. It was our first. Elena frowned. So what's the plan now? We go from defense to empire? You want to start conquering sectors like the Taykar did? Beck shook his head. Number, we don't need to conquer anyone. He looked around the room. They'll come to us. And they would. Because fear was faster than light. Because no species forgets the day they looked into the void expecting weakness and found something far worse. A human warship that didn't speak, didn't threaten, didn't plead. It simply ended them. The message wasn't written in words. It came in the form of a single ship. Axiom 10, sister to the vessel that had already made history. Larger, sharper, colder. No name painted on its hull, no broadcast of peace. It drifted into the neutral zone between the Orion trade rings and the Galactic Council's diplomatic orbit station, like a shadow cast by something ancient and cruel. No warning, no authorization, no negotiation. And yet, no one stopped it, because everyone recognized it, the silhouette of humanity's new voice. It docked in silence, and from its ventral bay descended a single drop shuttle, black as oil, lights dimmed like it was ashamed to be seen, or simply didn't care. Inside that shuttle sat Commander Aaron Beck. No medals, no dress uniform, just plain black fatigues and a small steel briefcase chained to his wrist. The Galactic Council had demanded dialogue after the Taykar massacre. Beck hadn't replied. He arrived instead. The council chamber on Station Valtres was a spiraling cathedral of alien architecture, filled with diplomats who had lived for centuries. Dozens of species, winged, scaled, silicon-based, even gas-borne, gathered in a haze of fear, wrapped in protocol. They stood when he entered, not out of respect, out of reflex. They'd all seen the footage. They knew his face, the man who ordered the erasure of the Taykar flagship, the ghost who never blinked while his railguns shattered empires. He didn't bow, didn't pause. He walked to the center of the room, placed the case on the council table, and looked around slowly. His voice, when it came, was flat steel. We are not requesting membership. A rustle of voices, shifting chairs, nervous murmurs. One alien, tall, robe-wrapped, voice like sand through metal, spoke for them. "You cannot ignore protocol. Earth has long been considered unstable." Beck's face didn't change. "You're right. We are unstable." He clicked the briefcase open. Inside, a simple holopad lit up. It showed coordinates. In Dominion space. Deep in Tekar-controlled territory, or what was left of it. Beck looked directly at the alien speaker. "We'll be testing our next gravity well weapon in this system. We advise all non-human traffic to vacate immediately." "You can't do this. I didn't ask?" Another voice shouted from the back, belonging to the Yarek ambassador. An old race, once believed to be humanity's intellectual superior. "You dare threaten sovereign systems with annihilation. You've made your point already." Beck cut him off. "Not a threat, a demonstration. The Tekar learned too late. You get to learn early. You'll make enemies." Beck leaned forward, calm and sharp. "We don't need friends, just silence." The room froze. No one blinked. They didn't understand Earth anymore. For centuries, the galaxy thought of humans as unpredictable, emotional, and messy. Now they were staring at something far worse. Purpose. And that terrified them. Beck tapped the holopad again. The screen shifted to a countdown, 96 hours to weapons test. Then he closed the case, locked it, and walked away without another word. He didn't look back, because he didn't have to. By the time he reached Axiom 10 again, 3 systems had already ordered full evacuation. 2 others had opened diplomatic channels asking to align with Earth. One ancient AI civilization, neutral for 6,000 years, sent an encrypted file labeled only, "Request, do not target." Back on Earth, the human population watched the broadcast with mixed emotions. Some cheered, some stared in silence. Others wept, not for the aliens, but because they recognized something in what they saw. This wasn't defense anymore. It was dominance. Global poles split down the middle. Some wanted to stop while they were ahead. Others wanted to make sure no other empire ever had the option to attack again. Beck knew the truth. There was no middle ground now. Earth had shown the universe what it meant to be underestimated. And they only had one direction left to go. The countdown reached 0. Axiom 10 floated in absolute silence at the edge of the targeted star system. Once a key Dominion stronghold, now an abandoned corpse of orbital debris and collapsed infrastructure. Humanity had warned everyone. Every scan said the system was empty. And that was exactly the point. The operation wasn't about killing. It was about reminding. Inside the command deck, Commander Beck stood alone, watching as the final targeting protocols locked into place. His officers stood back, not out of fear, but reverence. They weren't soldiers anymore. They were keepers of a message. Beck spoke into the comm quietly, the way a priest might read the last rites. "RZL system is green. Firing sequence confirmed." The ship didn't rumble. No explosion. No dramatic recoil. Just a pulse, like a ripple across still water. The gravity well destabilizer triggered in complete silence. From a distance, it looked like the center of the system simply folded. The star didn't go supernova. The planets didn't scatter. The entire solar mass simply collapsed into itself, pulled inward like it was tired of existing. Then, gone. No heat, no flare, just a perfect void, absolute and final. It was cleaner than destruction, and somehow more terrifying. Back on Earth, news agencies went dark the moment the footage came in. Emergency broadcasts ran instead, not to calm people, but to control the narrative. Beck's warning had been made clear. But before he could issue the next command, something changed. A ping, not from inside the ship, not from the nearby sectors, from outside known space. A signal, encrypted, ancient, buried beneath a 1,000-layer cipher humanity had never seen before. Beck stared at the data stream. It wasn't Tekar. It wasn't from any known civilization. And yet, it was addressed to Earth. He ordered a decryption AI online. Within minutes, the message was clear. Not in words, not in images, but in a pattern, a compression format based on Earth's own old-world satellite code. This wasn't first contact. It was a memory, something another race had left behind. A warning. One phrase pulsed in repeating binary, finally rendered on the screen in stark white letters. We did what you're doing. We erased what threatened us. We thought it would end there. Then another message followed. It doesn't end. It starts over. You become the thing you feared. Beck froze. It wasn't guilt that stopped him. It was the accuracy. The voice of some lost empire, long gone now, had pierced the veil of time and arrogance, warning humanity from the other side of history's gun barrel. Beck stood there in silence, staring at the void where a star system had once lived. He had won. Earth had risen. Humanity stood unmatched. But deep inside, something cold and sharp whispered that this moment wasn't victory. It was a mirror, and they'd just stepped into it. The Axiom crew waited for orders. But Beck didn't speak. He walked to the observation deck instead, watching the stars. Out there, beyond every sensor, beyond every war map, was the next question. How long until the galaxy stopped fearing humans and started preparing to become them,